now actually the basic main purpose of today's consultation is to to chalk out some strategies for future. I think the initial points have been already covered, and I think I think the date is September 3rd when the Karnataka notified this MVA 2019. So here I want to flag two three issues. The one is that the what is the target of the in front of the department and what is the role of civil society in achieving the target. Like transport commissioners have mentioned that the annual target is to reduce around 10% the deaths, accidents and injuries. And as per the more the target which is given to all the states is reducing 50% accidents and deaths by 2025. It means 5 years ahead of this 2030, which comes from this UN decade of action on road safety. So the I think everybody here in this hall must keep this target in mind. And then the target seems very mammoth and very huge, because it is very challenging to reduce 10% the deaths every year. So then here the role of civil society comes in, all the stakeholders need to help the government in achieving the target. That's why today we organize this consultation, that what could be the possible strategies to move forward. The second point I want to highlight here is that this target can be, the role of civil society could be, in three ways. We can, based on the ground level evidences and based on our research, we can suggest to the government here, the government of Karnataka, that what new policies, because like sir mentioned, the states have huge power of bringing in new policies and new plans and the new schemes for mitigating the road safety or combating the road safety, like they slash down the penalties under section 200 by 50%. So those powers can be used to bring in new innovations. So we think that the states can need to come up to bring new and innovative policies to feed in their state road safety policy, as I was discussing with some of the participants during this break. So one way is to bring new policies. What could be those new policies we can thought of, and we welcome and seek your the valued guidance and support and suggestions. What could be those the state level policies which will be directly feeding into the state road safety policy, which is already there in Karnataka state. The second way is to the strengthening the existing institutions, and here the lead agency is the Karnataka Road Safety Authority, and it is heartening to see this road safety in action in Karnataka, because in some of the states like Rajasthan we don't have such authority in place, and still we are advocating government of Rajasthan to make a very strong the lead agency, like Supreme Court committee also suggests that the lead agency has to be very strong. So Karnataka is having that the lead agency in the form of the State Road Safety Authority. Some of the other states are also having. So how to strengthen, formation is one stage, but that has to be well funded, and there has to be a very good action plan to achieve what I mentioned, the target of road safety. So there's likely we can strengthen the other policy and institutional frameworks of road safety. Strengthening is the second thing, and then the third one is to the ensuring the stake of multi stakeholders like the CSOs, and because road safety is the area where a lot of stakeholders are already playing their role. It is starting from various departments. So here our role comes, that how the as an helping hand to the state government, we can chip in and contribute in their the larger agenda and the policy goals. So I think we have already talked about this MVA 2019 and its key provisions, but I will just refer that there are 25 key provisions which are really very good. And this here only the 3 months journey I have mentioned, but like George mentioned, it was around 5 years, which took to come this act into play, act into being. And often we hear that legislations are passed during 10 minutes, 20 legislations are passed. We keep hearing, but this was the exception, bill, It gone to the various committees and Lok Sabha committee and the Rajya Sabha committee, well debated. We ourselves reached out to more than 250 MPs on this bill, that these are the provisions. And we are very heartening to share with this August gathering that there are certain provisions which came as per our own effort, and not only ours, because IPH was also one of the member of that coalition that time. So several new provisions we were able to brought into this MVA Act 2019. So these 25 key provisions, and we see these 25 provisions as opportunities of engagement with government. So we can't work on these all 25 key provisions. So we need to prioritize ourselves. So the fourth thing is that we need the state need to be prioritize their strategies and how to work, and which areas we need to focus. Like morning, George was mentioning the key risk factors is one of those areas. So I will be talking. I will not touch upon all these 25 provisions, but 11 provisions I will be talking. So we see these 11 provisions as huge opportunities. Next slide, please. So here we know that this National Register of Driving Licenses, the Vahan and Sarthi have come up. And why this is important, I have mentioned in the blue that the 30% of our licenses are bogus India-wide. So I think the new provision will be able to control this menace of having bogus licenses, multiple licenses. A driver which starts from Delhi and coming to Karnataka may be having 10 licenses in his pocket. If one is caught, he will be having another 9 licenses in his pocket. So I think this problem, and we need to engage on this issue, and we need to make it more robust, because and Sarth is also one of the this centralized portal will be coming. So the integration, we will be working on this issue and generating some data and giving regular feedback to the state and central government to further strengthening these provisions. So this is one of the area we will be working under 25A. The provision has come up. So we will be working on this issue. So I request our panelists and other participants, please give your valued suggestions on these 11 aspects, including this one. Next one, please. George was mentioning, 70% of this road safety victims or deaths were from juvenile youths. So here we want to emphasize the importance of road safety, of child road safety, because if we start early age the awareness and engagement with this children, I think since these some of the goals are long term, I think definitely that will help us. And there is a provision in section 129 about this thing, and the headgears and the standards, everything have been the provision this act. There are already several things like juvenile for juvenile, several provisions are there. For schools, already Supreme Court Bal Wahini guidelines are there. States have already come up with their initiatives of including this road safety chapters in some of the classes. So how we can club all these efforts and bring at one platform, like I was discussing with Nalin. All these efforts has to be integrated and in a coherent way, and what new schemes and programs we can initiate for ensuring child road safety, because it is very, very important, and we see is a very huge opportunity. So again, we need seek your advice and expert guidance that how we can devise some new activities and strategies to work and engage with the state government of Karnataka here, so that in next 3 years, because today's the recommendations or suggestions we will compile, and we will form our strategies and activities for next 3 years, next couple of years, and we will be working on those suggestions here, and we will be contributing in a way to the government of Karnataka. Third one. Why child road safety is important? I have tried to give some data. There were around 460 deaths were reported below 18 years, and the drivers, passengers, and pedestrians. So these were the deaths. Total deaths were 460. So, and again, this data, just for your information, I want to say that there are 3 sets of data available on road safety. One is what I mentioned here. This is the data which is given by MORTH, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. The second set of data comes from National Crime Records Bureau. And those data are always higher than the MORTH data. A third set of data which comes from WHO assessments and reports. And some of the the reports say that this what this more data is there, the actual data is 3 times more at India level. So this 460 is the data which we can consider for making strategies. So this is the the ground level realities. So we can think of. Next, please. The third one is non-motorized transport management. Like we keep discussing not only the motorized, but why I am talking here about the NMT, because this is the prerogative of state government to work on NMT, and then other than state, center will not at all intervene in this area. And it is clearly mentioned in section 188 that only the states will have to come up with their own strategies, policies, everything to work on non-motorized transport policy. And we strongly advocate to the form some policy, because already in Chennai this policy is there, and we are strongly advocating to the other states like the Rajasthan and Kerala also to manage this area very professionally. The fourth, next one, please. The, the accountability of road owning agencies. This is also one of the areas, and we are intending to do work in a very focused way on this aspect, because already this provision came up first time. And I think the credit goes to our coalition members and ourselves, that we given the exact the text to the some of the parliamentarians to be reflected in the MVA bill. And I think this came up as a result of a strong advocacy of the organizations like us. And now the road owning agencies will be liable to for either designing or constructing or maintaining poor and faulty roads. So this and now we want to see this this provision need to be implemented very seriously at all the states. So the why accountability is because there are because this bad or the faulty designs result into so many accidents and deaths. So I have taken 2016 data, because the 589 deaths were reported India wide. So this aspect is a huge aspect, and we seek your advice here in Karnataka how we can work on this issue. Section 198. Now the stringent fines. Again, this is an area like I recall the discussions have been had in Parliament and Rajya Sabha and all the committees about these raised penalties. And some of the earlier speakers were mentioning that these penalties had been revised after 30 years. So what is the rationality behind this enhanced penalty? So a lot of discussions happened, but the honorable Sri Commissioner Saab ne like he mentioned, Karnataka has slashed 50%, but since we were one of the main supporters and the advocates of the enhanced penalty, we request the government of Karnataka to to reconsider that decision, and if not that, the next 199B provision, which says that every year the penalties has to be increased by 10%. We here again I want to clarify that our aim is not to to raise money through penalties, but to create a deterrent effect among the the road the vehicle users, the road users, so that that can become as a deterrent effect, and people think twice before violating something, and not like in a joking way. Earlier used to the violate jump the traffic lights and used to throw 100 rupees, but now they will they should consider so in that way. But again, since the commissioners are already mentioned that they are working in this direction, but we were the groups which advocated for enhanced penalty. So the how we can the think of this thing, we will be working in Karnataka. So that is, we will be seek your advice on this particular issue also. Next point, please. Then again, that I tried to mention support this thing, this enhanced penalty and the risk factors by these statistics. Like George mentioned, I think the being one of the workers in the area of road safety, if we remember three things, I think we will understand the gravity of issue and the problems. What are the problems? And I think solution also arise from those problems. The number one data is the speeding. Speeding is killing 9,140 people out of 10,958 in Karnataka. So out of 10,958, 9,140 the reason is the speeding. So if you are able to calm down the speed, I think we can contribute something here. And if we are able to reduce the the speed and the number of deaths, I think we will be this will help into achieving our target of 10% to one every year. Second is drunken driving. Again, those many I think this is this drunken driving, very less cases reported. Helmet 1546. This is the second highlight I want to say. 1546 without helmet. If we are able to reduce the speed, we are able to enforce the helmet provision properly, I think we will be able to bring down the deaths very drastically. And third one is not mentioned here, but George has already mentioned 40%. Sorry, below 40 years, 70% deaths. And we are able to target the young generation. I think our victory should be ensured if we are able to deal these three sectors or three domains very effectively and like this thing. Then seat belts, the driver that was damaged. There was 439 people died due to the not wearing seat belt. And PAX means passengers. 379 passengers also reported. The deaths were reported which were not wearing seat belt. So all these things. These called 5 key risk factors, and these are the WHO given 5 risk factors. And this is one of our focus areas also, not only at the state level, but at national level also. We are working to bring or pull the attention of state governments to focus their interventions in working on these 5 key risk factors. The seventh is vulnerable road users. I think this VRUs, vulnerable road users, is one of the popular terms in the domain of road safety. And who are the vulnerable road users? The pedestrians, the cyclists, and even the two-wheelers, because they are vulnerable from the four-wheelers and the heavy vehicles. And if we see the deaths of these vulnerable sections, 1880 of pedestrians died in Karnataka last year, 2019, and 148 cyclists, and then 4,466. So this, I think the pedestrians and the two-wheelers, the data, the rate seems to be very, very high. So if we are able to focus two-wheelers properly, if we are, I think that will help us. And I want to seek the attention of Sri Commissioner sir, that that need special attention, these vulnerable road users. And if the state are able to, state of Karnataka is coming up with new plan or policy, new plan for this, I think definitely we will be able to contribute something here in next coming years. Next one. The Good Samaritan, we have already talked, and Sri Sudhakar ji already mentioned in the morning that how like an initiative led by Piyush Tiwari in Delhi helped in bringing in those guidelines first, and now these provisions in section 134A. So I think this is this is the area where we will be working. We are already working. We not from today. We are working on this section for last 15 years. This is very much important and critical, because in saving lives, all the problems and challenges which are faced by Good Samaritans need to be addressed. So hopefully that now this message is going down, and all the hospitals and Thana and the police Thanas, this message is being passed. So the situation is changing, but this has to be enforced properly and effectively. We want to see this in Karnataka also. Next one. The electronic monitoring and enforcement. Like when I started working in this road safety, I went for some training, and in training one resource person was there. Then he said that I came here to talk only one word, and I said I will not speak after this one word. And he said that I will talk about only enforcement, and I will end my presentation here. So so here I want to emphasize that thing that the enforcement is very very critical and very very important. But this new Act 2019 has given us opportunity of electronic monitoring also, which is going to be very crucial in coming years. Earlier, this electronic monitoring was not legally backed up, but now it is legally backed up. And I think here also last week's one of our meetings when we were analyzing our contribution to the more than this legislation. Here also our group, given a lot of recommendations, and in this provision, several provisions which are already there. The suggestions were given by our own group, which is called Road Safety Network India. So we need to work on this. Next one is the National Road Safety Board. Like we are already discussing, this is very important, and this is at formation stage. We are working with more. The good experts should come in, and the states will also be having their role in this. We will engage with the state government to have a constructive role in Road Safety Board, and then Karnataka Road Safety Authority. Here I mentioned for two reasons. The Road Safety Authority has to be very effective so that the other states can learn, and definitely we will learn the steps being taken by government of Karnataka, which will be advocated to government of Rajasthan. So that at least we can advocate and ask the state government to form similar strong lead agency in the Karnataka and the Rajasthan also. So the next slide talks about our recommendations. What are the key way forward? We can form new policies. We can strengthen the existing institutional arrangements, and those other provisions also we can focus. We can focus on 5 key risk factors. So thank you all. Thank you very much. We seek your valuable guidance and support and valuable suggestions to for moving forward, which will help us into forming a very good strategy and engaging the state government. Thank you.
I congratulate PEF and CUTS for organizing this very important panel discussion on an extremely important issue for the nation. The loss of lives and limbs in road accidents and properties is so humongous in road accidents that very simply the road accident can be called the permanent pandemic in the country. Lakhs of people are dying. But road accidents don't just happen. There are causes for road accidents. And if we analyze them, we find there are very many causes. And we also find that there are many, many agencies which are involved, many, many stakeholders involved both ways, in causing road accidents or in solving the problem, in causing the problem and solving both ways. So therefore, I don't think that anyone of us is under wrong impression that the Motor Vehicles Act can solve all the problems, but it is one of the most important intervention. Of course, most of the things are covered, but say for road congestion and road accidents, things like land use, town planning in the cities, road engineering, Mr. Sudhakar mentioned and all of us have been seeing, traffic engineering in particular, the manpower available for enforcement of the rules and laws, the competence of that manpower, the technology available, even weather plays a role in road accidents. So therefore there are many, many things, but it's very nice that the PEF and CUTS have organized this to concentrate on one of the most important aspects, which the Motor Vehicles Act can play a very important, it does play and can play even better role in solving at least reducing the road accident. We'll come to that 10% or 5%, maybe in the end we will see what can be done. So with these few words, I invite Mr. Ravikant Gowda, the Additional Commissioner of Police Traffic, Bangalore City, who is a very experienced officer, having worked in various capacities and having dealt with problems to road safety. One request to the panelists is that, as usual, we are running behind schedule, behind time, very much behind schedule. So kindly take 10 to 15 minutes, not more than 15 minutes. And for the information of others who may not be knowing, that the panelists have been given some questions. So if you find that why they are not talking on such issue, it's because they have been requested to speak on those issues given to them. So they may be touching upon other aspects, but they may be mainly speaking on the issues which have been given to them in advance. Mr. Ravikant Gowda.
Kumar Singh sir, Sri Shukumar sir, and all other panelists, dignitaries in this discussion, consultation meeting. As rightly said, we have given with 3 questions. The first question is, what are some structural and remedial measures that should be adopted to ensure safety for road users in cities? I want to address this question dividing like with respect to roads, with respect to vehicles, with respect to road users, and with respect to enforcement. Roads, see, our roads, when Mr. Sudhakar Rao was speaking, he was not here. I think he has mentioned about the engineering aspect of the roads. If you see the Indian city roads, the lack of engineering aspect is very much, we can see and we can feel, and that is the main cause of the accidents. And people normally blame the traffic police for this. They don't blame the other stakeholders. So much so they blame us. They will not blame other civic agencies when accident happen. For example, if you take Mr. Charian also mentioned about the 7 deaths in Koramangala accident. If you see that accident, I'll take that accident as an example and try to explain all this. That was a road, concrete road. On the concrete road, you cannot put any speed calming measure. And BBMP or any other civic agency who is putting those roads, they are very happy that we are insisting them to put road calming measures. There was a curve. We were insisting to put road calming measures. They are now telling that it is not possible to put any high-raised pedestrian crossing there or even thick rumblers there. That is one thing. Again, whether our roads are properly illuminated, that is the second thing. 33% deaths are pedestrian deaths in on Bangalore city roads. When we study all these accidents, pedestrian accidents, we notice that bad illumination has caused many accidents, 80% of the accidents. And road signages, that is about it may be traffic signages or it may be directional boards. If you put proper directional boards, it will reduce at least 10 to 15% of the accidents. Because the person definitely will be knowing to which direction he is moving, whether he has to move to the right, left, and signages also, and road markings, particularly road markings, what I observed is 20 to 30% it will reduce the accidents. That is not my experience, it is the experience of our constables, head constables who are actually working on the field. These are the small things we can improve upon and achieve the 10% less accidents. It is possible. Road engineering is a very important aspect which we are not able to address. Our investment is so much, we are not able to address. Again, whether our roads are pedestrian friendly, that is the question. Whether our pedestrians can walk in any of the roads on pedestrian footpaths, that is the $1 million question in Bangalore. Because we are all traveling in 4-wheelers, maximum here, we came to this hall mostly through four-wheelers. We don't really know the pain of pedestrians. Pedestrians are the real sufferers. 33% of the deaths in Bengaluru is of pedestrians. That is the real concern. Again, the roundness of the roads, that is one more thing. Roads, when we are traveling on a road, there will be a sharp curve. The roundness of the road definitely reduces the accidents. These are all small issues, small engineering problems. It can be resolved without any much investment. Avoiding sudden turns, sudden right turns. These, if we address all these problems, definitely road safety will increase and people will travel in a safe manner on the roads. Very important is delivering post-crash care. Shivkumar sir rightly mentioned this portion of the road safety, this part of the road safety is addressed very badly. People will come to the spot, ambulance will come to the spot, the paramedics will not be knowing how to handle the case. That is the issue. Ambulance will come, definitely ambulance will come. Again, ambulance driver will decide to which hospital he has to take. He will take the patient. There is I want to bring to the kind notice of this August gathering that there is a mafia, ambulance mafia in which the driver is involved. He will take the patient, the injured, to the hospital where actually he wanted, where that hospital gives more commission. This is the situation. This should be addressed. Otherwise, the nearest hospital will be 1.5 to 2 kilometers. You will take the patient to hospital 10 kilometers to 15 kilometers away hospital. This is the issue. Every day, Bangalore traffic police are clearing. Yesterday, we cleared 918 ambulances. We have given green corridors to 918 ambulances. Zero traffic, we have given 918 ambulances. Every day, almost average 1,000 we are giving. This around 10% will be pertaining to around, not 10%, 2% to 3% pertaining to accidents, serious accidents. Therefore, what I am trying to tell is delivery of post-crash care is very important in increasing the road safety. Second is, again I come back to that accident. Last 4 minutes are there. In Koramangala case, their airbags were not opened. We were also under the impression that if you don't put the seat belt, airbags will not open. Publicly, we are again telling that same thing, so that people will put the seat belt and go. But when we inquired during investigation, we inquired with the company. They told that is not so. There will be sensors. The sensors will suddenly open the airbags. We asked the company, why these airbags? In spite of that, so it will first hit a footpath, then the bollard, then to a wall. It should have, airbag should have opened when it hit the footpath. It never opened, sir. We asked them, why? They are now telling that there may be some problem with the sensors. My question is, whether we are investigating, this company belongs to Germany, sir. Very prestigious car company, Audi. Whether the same quality of the vehicle they are delivering to Indians, that is the questions. That is the question we should ask. Whether it can absorb the energy which is released during an accident. That is the question we want to ask. Therefore, the vehicle is very important. We are not addressing it even during our investigation, even during our discussions. We are just talking that, yes, very good company coming and delivering the vehicles to the road users here. After an accident, whether the same quality of the vehicle delivered in Europe is delivered here, delivered in US, delivered here. That is the question. We are not able to, initially they were telling that there is a black box. When we try to find it out, it is not there. Then we took their manual. They are now telling that some electronic device is there. Please show us, where is the electronic device? Our RTO people came, sir. They also asked them, where is the electronic device? These are the questions we should ask regarding when we are addressing road safety, the vehicle. The third point I want to use about the road users. You know how we are. When a person from India go to America, he will follow all the rules. When he landed in Bangalore Kempegowda International Airport, the first thing he will start doing is violating traffic rules. This is our mentality, this is our attitude. Whether we are trying to inculcate the culture of road safety in our children, because in the morning if you go to any area to bring milk, the father of the child will take the child in his scooter without helmet, without seat belt, they will take. What culture we are imparting? This is a very important thing. The road safety culture, we are not able to build. The fourth thing I want to talk about, enforcement. Enforcement is very important, very critical, according to me. Don't think I'm a police man, I'm advocating this. For example, as a experiment, we did this. On August 6th, 7th, 8th of this year, unannounced, we stopped doing enforcement on Bangalore roads. We were just trying to take the photographs, because every day we take contactless enforcement will be around 25,000 cases every day, through video, through photographs, through our cameras, 25,000 public eye, 25,000 normally. August 6th, 7th, 8th, we stopped. Okay, let us see. People are telling that we are harassing them. We are like hawks. So 3 minutes it takes. 3 minutes. They were alleging that we are like hawks. We stopped enforcement. Then what happened? All these 3 days, our contactless enforcement, evidence-based enforcement gone up. 25 to 38,000, 38 to 46,000. What it shows? If you stop enforcing contact enforcement, all people are very happy in violating rules. Our attitude is see a policeman and follow the rules. If you don't see a policeman, violate the rules. This is our attitude. Therefore, if we address all these aspects, that is, one is the roads, road users, vehicles, and the enforcement. If we integrate this, then only it is possible to educate and build a culture of safety. Then only it is possible for us to realize the dream of reducing 10% accidents on Indian roads. That is one thing. Second question is about educating our people.
Almost time, Ravi.
Yes, sir. Our police men and officers, we are doing it. It is a continuous process. Third point is about whether this act, the new act, has resulted in reducing the accidents or very effective. Definitely it is effective. I want to say one thing. Because of the judicial intervention, this act came into existence, not because of the political prudence. We should know that. That's why after the act is coming into effect also, the rules are amended by whims and fancies by the governments because of the pressure from the people, political pressure. Judicial intervention really made our life easy, not the political will. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravikanta Gowda, particularly for
Is there any increase in the number of cases, the number of violations post 2019 or decrease?
There is increase in the sense, sir, we have reduced contact enforcement and increased contactless enforcement, sir. We were having only 250 FTWR, sir, tabs. That is taking photographs, uploading, evaluating and all. We have given 4,000 tabs now. 1,000 tabs means we have downloaded the software. With the OEM, we have made an agreement. Every constable is having that software, sir.
so naturally it will be
It is more now. The one happy thing is that when you are going to have a drive for a particular offense, the death due to that particular violation will reduce. But so one more thing I want to tell to the experts. Helmetless driving causing lot of death. Therefore, people are forced to wear helmet because of the high fines. Problem is that whether they are wearing proper helmets, that is the question. Even with helmets, deaths are more because they are not wearing proper helmets. And ISI is not coming to our rescue, sir, because everywhere you can see ISI mark helmets and weight and measures people should ride them and book them. They are not doing it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Transport Commissioner as well as our Traffic Commissioner, Karian Saab, and all my senior colleagues. This is an opportunity through this forum where we want to. Otherwise, also my voice is very loud. Okay. Through this forum, we want to share our responsibility, that is the Infrastructure Development Agency, that is the PWD, Public Works Department, how it is associated with this motor. Session is going on. Sir, we finished the work in the morning and we ran here. So, because this is also important for us. So, just to show how we are involved in this Motor Vehicle 2019 Act, how we can support an organization. That is the one question what they have been given. And the second question is the challenges that what we are facing in achieving this. So, as Sharma Saab has pointed out, very clearly, the agency, the defaulter agency in the construction of roads or in the maintenance of the roads, that will be also penalized. And even the act says jail, this one implementation for that defaulting this one. So as far as the organization PWD, as Ravikanta Gowda said, as and when accident happens, who is responsible? Whether the road is responsible or whether the driver who was driving, how he was driving, or the seat belt concept, whatever it is. So what is the reasons of that? And if it comes to the fault of road, then definitely the department implementing infrastructure, creating department is definitely we feel bad. Whenever we hear or recently the accident which is very much discussed today. So we also felt what went wrong, whether our road was good. The agency may be different, BBMP or Smart City or PWD, or there are different implementing agencies. But at the end, it is the engineer. It is the engineer who has designed it, whether the engineer who has implemented it, the engineer who has maintained it. That is more important, this one. And Sudhakar Saab has said in the morning, it is not just construction, it is the road engineering now. So earlier, just through PWD, we used to prepare the action plan and we used to construct the road. Whether the impact of that, no one used to study. But nowadays, it is. So to achieve this, we have developed a road network. So road network throughout the state, for the Karnataka state, it is ready with us. And in the phased manner, we are planning to implement it. So there are a lot of challenges in implementing. That is a different story. But as a organization, uh, this one we have created now. Earlier it was just PWD, Public Works Department was doing everything. Now specialization has been built in the Public Works Department also. So if you require to highway constructions, National Highway is there. So National Highway is available in the Bangalore and all in the district places, and that we are looking it out. And we have created many special purpose vehicle of organizations now. Example, KSHIP, Karnataka Highway Improvement Project, that is World Bank assisted as well as ADB assistant. Through them, we are constructing specific bridges and major roads that are connecting state to state. So that is there. Then even we have got this KRDCL is there where we are implementing specific type of jobs, outer ring roads and all we are taken. And then the state highway development where I was working. Recently I've been transferred and today, tomorrow again, my new placement will be there. So this one, I was looking after this, all the state highways. So we had developed the core network for that. We had done the how phase-wise planning and implementation of that. We were doing it. So that is available. So main thing what is required now is, one thing is the connectivity. So to improve the economic conditions of the people, and this one connectivity is required. So that connectivity, how to achieve it, and in time achievement, that is what is more important, and for which the department now is giving more emphasis. So just developing a road somewhere in the corner of the state doesn't mean now. So we require that how if we implement this road, what will be its impact on the economy also. So that audit is also being carried. So the construction part, yes, we got departmentally also engineers are available, and even there is a provision of taking consultants' help in designing the roads. So the road engineering, that is the software that are available, latest software that are available. Our engineers are well versed with that now. And the time taken to design the roads also we have reduced it. That is one thing, because always the local representatives or elected representatives, they say whenever we give any task to the department, they take years together, but that is not happening now. So immediately that is available, and a good report on that is available. Road census, regularly we are carrying it out and we are identifying. And then through quality department, we have established the quality departments. Through them, they go, they visit, and they see if there is any black spots are there, or if any junctions have to be improved, they give us the feedback now. So that is in regular process, it is happening. So it is not that just whenever it is required, we are constructing. It is not like that now. So a lot of R&D also is happening in the department. And at this one, there is a provision for taking any help, outside help, and immediately ISC is available. So leading institutions are available with us now. And that the head of the institution has been empowered to take the services of that. So with that, the improvement of the roads conditions, survey, everything is being done. If it is some roads, if it is required, immediate widening and all. If the core in the middle portion and all is good, only widening is required. Immediately we are implementing in that way. If some road require right from the construction, yes, we are taking the core log, we are designing the road to that extension, and as per the motor vehicle acts, as per the load that is allowed for particular this vehicles and all, considering all that, considering the census, this one. So we are designing this one. So as far as the designing, connectivity establishment, then bottlenecks or hairpin curve, this one, then gradient analysis or gradient tackling, everything it is now possible. That is not at all a problem. Only thing is implementation. So for implementation, as the second part, organization, or what are the challenges that we are facing. One thing is for this to implement all these things, everyone wants immediately. If the Bidar representative says, this is very important, give me, this is do. The Chikmagalur MLA will say, this is important, you do this. But again, it is the financial constraint. But financial constraint as such, if we plan it properly, definitely we can achieve it. So that is not at all a problem. So already we have prepared, the planning phase is done, and the DPRs for the depending upon the core area network, we have kept it ready with us, and only the funds allocation, this one, based on that, we are going to tackle all these things. So that is the way how the PWD as a major infrastructure department to support the transportation segment in our state, we are doing it. So I think as far as engineering knowledge is concerned, yes, we got very good talented engineers. Earlier, just it was a civil engineering that was there. Now, transportation engineering is available, specialization is available. How to carry out this transportations, this one, that is also available, and lot of capacity building exercises are also being carried out now. So we are sending our engineers for training purpose, for specific assignment purpose. So with this, and as the entry of this World Bank and ADB, Asian Development Bank also, they are with us and they are ready to fund in this sector. So proper planning and implementation, if it is done, definitely we can to contribute a lot towards this new Motor Vehicle Act, where in which the compensation part is the major thing, and as well as the golden hour, what they see, that is the insurance. The insurance, again, it has to come from government only. So to reduce this means to reduce the accidents. So definitely the knowledge that is available with the department and the specialization that is available, the special purpose vehicle organizations that have been created in Karnataka, definitely we can do this. And apart from this, recently it has been the project planning and road data analysis that is available with us. So right from all the north to south, east to west of Karnataka, the data is available. Which road conditions, what improvement it is required, and the bridges, the conditions of the bridges, and we got special vehicles for this, who visit to the spot and collect the data and feed the data into the database, so that sitting in Bangalore, this one, we can prepare and we can give a good presentation and convince the local representatives as well as to the minister to take up the major important work that is very much required in the state. So this way, definitely the PWD department is with the Motor Vehicle Act, and definitely through this forum, the department is definitely all the time it is there. So we can join our hands in solving these accidental cases. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, and thanks for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be amidst this distinguished group, trying to put in place mechanisms for strengthening road safety in Karnataka. Specifically, I have been informed to discuss on the Good Samaritan law. But before going to that, I would just like to spend 2 minutes on the road safety issue and then move to trauma care issues. Like sir just mentioned now, I've had the opportunity to work in the field of road safety for more than 3 decades now. And in fact, in many government departments and government places where people keep on getting transferred or changed, I've had the privilege to work in an institution where there is no transfer. So I could continue my work in one area or in my area of specific interest, and also which is a priority concern for the country and the state over a period of time. I also was heading the
World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Injury Prevention, one of the 3 centers in Southeast Asian region. And we have been engaged in research, legislation, advocacy, public education, policy making, trauma care, disability, rehabilitation, many aspects of road safety over a period of time, and contributed in a number of ways. There are 3 specific points which I would like to place in front of this house. One is, after nearly 6 to 7 decades of intense research all over the world, it is very clear road safety is science. It is more than human emotions. It is more than our personal reactions. It is more than the ad hocism that we have adopted all throughout. Today, if I tell somebody that I am going to give you an intramuscular injection to your scalp, it's not going to be accepted. Because an intramuscular injection should be given to the place where muscles are there and the drug can be absorbed. And that has come out of science. Same way during the COVID-19 pandemic, from somewhere on which we did not know anything, today we are entering a phase of, after 18 months, where things are looking that they would get resolved and resume in a few months. We have to live with it for many more years, but things might come back to normal, and that has been possible because of the scientific developments. Road safety is also science, and countries across the world have invested millions and billions and trillions to understand why road crashes happen. And crash investigation, analysis, and crash analysis processes is a discipline by itself which tries to understand why road crashes occur and what needs to be done to reduce or prevent it. And that's one reason why many countries around the world, especially high-income countries, have been able to bring down road deaths in a very significant manner. To give one example, France in 2003 had about 2009 road deaths every year. Nicolas Sarkozy, the Prime Minister of France, made a public announcement that we will reduce our road deaths by 50% in 5 years. And by 2008, their number of deaths per year was 3,000. And it continued thereafter. It has now come down to less than 1,000 deaths. It has been possible because mechanisms have been established to address this problem in a scientific way. We can find out thousands and thousands of reasons as to why road crashes occur. And like Sir said, the only solution we will have in the end is to install Lord Ganesha in every road, at maybe every 10 feet, if we put one. But even that can cause, because in Tamil Nadu, there was a study we were involved earlier, where the road hoardings they put up on the roads, people put up of all these beautiful cinema actors and, prominent personalities selling everything. Drivers were all looking at that and then causing crashes. So even Lord Ganesha may be a responsible factor for road crashes. We don't know. We'll have to study that. The point is that if we don't understand a problem, we will never be able to find a solution. We can keep on talking and discussing for ages. We have seen many patients who have come to our hospital with different health problems, and when we ask them, why are you coming so late? What were you doing all these days? They said, sir, now we were doing all other things. We did not know that we had to do this. And this happens after 8 years or 10 years. And by that time it is too late. We are in the same situation today where our vehicles have exploded, exponentially increased, and we are trying to find a solution amidst all that. And luckily we have the Indian Motor Vehicle Act as one tool that is available for us. Based on all this, one important learning from this thing is, there are 5 areas that we need to address in road safety. And these are called as the 5 pillars of road safety. Many of you might be aware of this. Without a proper road safety management mechanism, we will not get anywhere going further. In my so many years of work, I have had the opportunity to work with some of the people like Dr. Ajay Kumar Singh when he was a commissioner, where I could easily approach him, discuss with him, sit with him, show the data. And he was so inquisitive at one point when we were talking about, sir, I just want to bring a minute of nostalgic memory to you. When we were talking about underreporting of road deaths, and when I met you and informed you that our underreporting is to some extent, you said no, it is not possible. We report every death and injury on Bangalore roads, and this was in the year 2000. You said you show me the proof. I took all the registers in which we had collected data from NIMANS and few other hospitals, took it to his office, and he spent time in examining that and looking at that and then comparing it, and then said, I think you have a point here. This is exactly the words which you used in the year 2000. But if we don't make attempts to examine and understand that, we will not go anywhere. So proper road safety management, which is based on data and science, is a requirement. We need policy, we need program, we need training, we need capacity building, we need monitoring, we need technology, we need evaluation, we need everything. And that requires road safety management. Then there is safe roads, like Mr. Kulkarni just mentioned. How do we, today roads are designed not with concrete and pillars. Roads are designed to be people friendly. The fields of sociology, psychology, economics and development all tell us human beings are human beings. Wherever we are, when we, like Mr. Ravikant Gowda said, when we go to America, we follow. When we are in India, we don't follow. It's not because of the people. Americans come and cross on MG Road wherever they want. Is it because they don't know what rules are? When we go to America, we follow their rules. Is it because we are fully aware of their rules? Absolutely not. It's because of the systems in which we live. Systems are built in such a way that people are made to respect certain things, which comes more out of the developmental process of each region. So we need to take that also into account. Then we have safe vehicles. We heard the example. The best sold vehicles of many high-income countries come with very poor safety concerns. Where is the safety concerns? And then we have safe people who need to be done. We need to do 10 things if we need to quickly achieve success in road safety. 80% of the people who are road users, they need to wear helmets, they need to wear seat belts, they should not be drinking and driving, they should follow prescribed speed limits, they should not use mobile phone, pedestrians must be made safer. Then drugs is a big problem in many cities now. Drugs and driving should be addressed. Driver fatigue should be addressed. Sleeplessness for night crashes to be addressed. If we do these 6 to 8 things on a priority basis, get the population to that level, we can achieve road safety. Otherwise, we will not be able to achieve. Current usage rates are around 50 to 60% in the city of Bangalore. And that too in central areas, in daylight hours, wherever there is a policeman on the road, wherever there is a camera on the road. Let's go to Outer Ring Road and check how many people wear helmets. It's about 25%. And lastly, the post-crash care, I would come here. We did several studies over a 5-year period in Bangalore under the Bangalore Road Safety Program, where we analyzed data and examined different issues to see where we have to intervene. About 1/3 of the road in deaths, people die on the spot. It is what is called as on-the-spot deaths. There is nothing much anybody can do for them, except the primary prevention of making safe roads, safe vehicles, or any other things. We can't do anything, but that can be reduced. It can be brought down to 0%. About 10 to 15% of the people, they die on their way to a hospital or from one hospital to another. And that is the pre-hospital trauma care systems need to work. 50% of the people, they die in the hospital. And there is a first wave death, there is a second wave death, there is a third wave death. Trauma care systems include pre-hospital, in-hospital and post-hospital care. And it is a continuum of care. Many a times we think by doing one, we have solved the problem. One example, we add 125 ambulances 2 weeks back. Yes. Ambulances take the patient from the crash site to a hospital. But if the hospital, if there is no doctor, no X-ray machine, no laboratory facility, no surgical intervention, patient cannot die, survive. Okay, we take him to a private hospital and then take him for treatment. The private hospital will say, deposit 20,000 rupees, then walk inside. Where will, nobody will carry 25,000 in their pocket and then go on the road and expect an accident to happen. If we don't build these systems that we have to work with, we are not going anywhere. We can talk. But the thing is, trauma care is a continuum of activities right from the crash site. There should be first responders, there should be first aid care, they should be transported in a safe mode, they should be taken to a place where they are treated, there should be triage facilities available, there should be trained doctors available, facilities to be available. All this need to happen in succession. Even if one element is breaking, the chain is broken and then it stops. So that requires. We did an evaluation, somebody mentioned in the morning, I think sir you mentioned, Tamil Nadu reduced their accident death rates by 10%, you mentioned sir. The reason is we did an evaluation of Tamil Nadu trauma care systems 2 years back. All that they did was they did not construct new hospitals. All that they did was they introduced triage in every hospital. They put a trauma nurse coordinator in every hospital. They trained all categories of staff in their hospitals and established a referral system. They did not spend extra money. They did not construct hospital or bought 200 ambulances. It's putting a trauma care system with series of steps that made the difference. And we evaluated them, found the death rate in those hospitals where it was improved versus those hospitals where it had not improved, and the mortality difference was 28%. So, Good Samaritan law came into place on the first basic fundamental premise that if a person is given trauma care as early as possible, what we call as within 1 hour or within the golden hour, the chances of his survival are likely to be higher. The extent of damages that happen to his body can be reduced. The number of disabilities can be reduced further, and then his recovery gets faster. It's based on this fundamental principle that earlier the care, chances of recovery are high. But there were a lot of problems in our system because anytime when anyone volunteered to inform or take a patient or provide a first aid care or take him to a nearest hospital, there were many medical barriers, there were many legal barriers, there were many administrative barriers. Now, to overcome all this, we have in fact asked many people during the first aid training program, why is it that they don't volunteer? They say, we are harassed by the local police, we have been called by the courts to provide witness, we have been asked to sign in the registers, we are asked to pay money in certain situations where it involves charges for the hospital. And at times, even after 4 years, when my daughter is getting married, the summons are issued to me in the wedding hall. It's to break these barriers, a Good Samaritan has to be recognized, and then the legal, administrative, and financial barriers had to be taken out. And the Good Samaritan law started, actually, this whole thing refers back to 1988. There is a very interesting case of Pandit Paramanand Katara versus Union of India, where it was said that no hospital can refuse treatment to any injured person. It dates back to 4 decades, and we are in 2021 talking about how to implement Good Samaritan law. And in 2012, this whole process started. The highly empowered committee of the Supreme Court informed Government of India to bring this, and then 2016 it was accepted. 2018 Karnataka government passed the act. But even today, the challenges that remain are, most people are unaware of it. They still are afraid of the police and law and the courts and other people. That has to be removed. Second, hospitals have not changed. That has to change. Even today we know hospitals where they ask, ನೀವೇನು details you don't have to say, but just sign here. But the sign is enough for that person to be called back. Why should he sign? So that has to change. The police stations, it has to change. Whenever a caller calls up an emergency helpline number, no details to be asked, and he should not be asked to pay money. And a Good Samaritan fund also needs to be established under the Good Samaritan law, like the Road Safety Fund. That has still not happened. So a lot of these things need to happen for Good Samaritan law to come into place. And side by side, we also need to improve the first care responder mechanism with first aid training and many other aspects. Specifically coming to trauma care facilities, we have now, I'm also the chairman of the Karnataka Health Vision Group. We have come up with some mechanisms of how we can strengthen trauma care. 1 minute. Trauma care. We need to have many things in place. It is starting from right interventions to the triage, to the training, to referral systems, to financial management, to rehabilitation, surgical care, trauma care, critical care. All this needs to be integrated to deliver the best possible care. And one thing we have suggested is to make our district hospitals and trauma care centers more functional. And there are a number of steps that need to be taken in that direction. So the biggest challenge today is if a person goes to a private hospitals and he doesn't have insurance, it's a hell of a time for him. But if he goes to a government setup, there are no adequate facilities and the type of care that he can really get. So we are stuck in this situation and need to move out of it in different ways. I will stop here and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, thanks for inviting me to speak on public transport. I know so far it's all has been about safety, how to improve road safety and enforcement, engineering, that kind of discussion so far. But the thing is, the thing with all the discussion that happened so far is that we are assuming that people will be in cars and two-wheelers. And so we need to talk about helmets, seat belts, enforcement, crash, post-crash, pre-crash, all of that. So the thing is, once people are in public transport, automatically safety improves. If you see any kind of statistics anywhere in the world, the moment people are in public transport, it can even be paratransit, even auto rickshaws, shared auto rickshaws, they are much more safer than private vehicles. So it is quite important to encourage public transport to improve road safety. And that has been actually missing in the road safety discourse. Road safety discourse is always about the vehicle design or helmets and enforcement and engineering. So thanks to the organizers for actually recognizing public transport as an important part of the road safety conversation also. Secondly, the title of the session itself is Implementation Challenges, or now it's changed to Enforcement Challenges. Earlier it was Implementation. So Motor Vehicles Act had a big component on road safety and a separate component which is very, very important also on the governance of mobility. And that's where public transport is important. So even though not from the road safety angle, people generally recognize the value of public transport because many people are dependent on it, and vehicle ownership in India is still low. So we generally know public transport is important, but still enough hasn't been done on it. Primarily because the way our governance is actively actually discourages promotion of public transport and not encourages public transport. So a lot of public transport discussion is always about, oh, the bus agency is not getting enough funding and stuff like that. But that is only a small part of the problem. The bigger part of the problem is the way our Motor Vehicle Act actually regulates transport. By definition, actually limits public transport promotion. The reason is that public transport is broadly, so any commercial vehicle to operate needs to get a permit. And the permit is either a stage carriage permit or a contract carriage permit. And contract carriage is supposed to be like a taxi-like service, point to point, and not a shared transport service. So the moment we have stage carriage, contract carriage, and a permit, it is actually, you are having this vendor kind of relationship with the service provider that I will decide whether you ply or not. Whereas if you see the more established economies, So basically our transport departments function as a licensing authority. So somebody applies and they either accept or reject the license or a permit. But the way European countries or others, they proactively plan for public transport. So you decide that, okay, I have so many people, I need so much service, so I need so much public transport, and for that I will issue public service contracts and not permits or licenses. So it is proactively planned, and we give so many vehicles to plan for so many vehicles to be operating, and then decide on the contract and the terms and everything. So what we have instead is a contract carriage permit. So a lot of people apply. So I mean, for long distance, say Bangalore to Chennai or Bangalore to Hyderabad, some of these high demand routes, everybody has a contract carriage permit, and we have oversupply. And in rural transport, we have actually undersupply, because private operators are only in a profit making mode, which is what their business is. On the other hand, we have public transport, which has a sole proprietorship on the stage carriage permit, and they have limitation of funds. So on one hand, we have public transport which is underfunded, and private transport which is only profit oriented and so operates on high demand routes. And as a result, which is actually cutting into the limited money public transport agencies are also making. So towards addressing this problem, so there are 2-3 ways of governing public transport in general. So one is called the deregulated competition, where it's a free for all, anybody can go on the street and operate, and you compete on the streets for people. There is organized competition, where the European context, where the government proactively plans, and then there is competition between operators, on whoever quotes the least will get the contract to operate. And then complete monopoly, which is uh, completely owned and operated by the government. So we have a mix of deregulated and monopoly competition, where, for example, in Karnataka State Road Transport Corporation has a monopoly on highways, which means that only they can provide public transport or stage carriage services. And then on the other hand, we have the contract carriage operators, all the shared auto rickshaws and private buses, who also operate supposedly on a taxi like service, but they actually operate also public transport. So they are competing with each other. So we ideally need to move from both ends of the spectrum towards a regulated competition. That is in theory, but what we have actually in the Motor Vehicles Act, I mean, the moment we say implementation challenges, we are assuming that the act itself is good, we just need to find a way to implement it properly. But the way the Motor Vehicles Act itself is that there are fundamental flaws. So the way the act is designed, it says that actually at multiple sections, I have all the sections numbers and all, which I don't want to bother you with all the jargon. But what it actually moves towards is a deregulated competition, which we already know doesn't work. 4 or 5 things that it proposes is that right now, commercial vehicles have an annual, actually they have a permit for 5 years, which needs to be renewed every year with a fitness certificate. So they actually propose to have state level schemes, which actually takes away the whole permit system and give licenses. License is perpetual, so you can, until your death or the vehicle's death, you can keep operating it, which is not good actually. From a safety perspective, you need to keep the vehicle in check, you need to get the driver in check, insurance and many other things come into play. And then on the competition, actually at multiple sections, it actually tries to waive away the whole permit, the requirement for stage carriage permit or contract carriage permit for rural transport and also for last mile connectivity. So, I mean, even though, I mean, nobody is actually checking, right? So I can apply saying that I'll only operate rural transport. But in India, it's not like we have a village once in 20 kilometers. We have everywhere we have villages. Anybody can be a rural transport operator. Similarly, last mile connectivity, we have public transport everywhere. So anywhere to anywhere can be last mile to some public transport, right? So the thing is, the way it is vaguely written, and so anybody can use it as competition to public transport, which eventually ends up as a deregulated competition on the streets for passengers, which kills the whole public transport business in general. So even Shivakumar sir was saying how for electric auto rickshaws they have relaxed permits, and after a point auto rickshaw operators themselves come and ask for permit, because that ensures a balanced demand supply equilibrium. So permit systems are needed, but the act actually tries to get away from it. And the other thing is, that is within the state. And also interstate, there is a lot of interstate travel also. The Motor Vehicles Act actually calls for a central scheme where interstate operations are governed by the center. Right now, there are interstate agreements. For example, KSRTC and MSRTC or KSRTC, TSRTC, they have interstate agreements to operate buses across states. Now that is being taken up by the central government. Central government has 20,000 other things to do. Why will they want to get into route level planning? So that actually is not a right way of approaching things. So that's on the public transport side. And then there is this whole new mobility ecosystem which has been rapidly emerging over the past 5-6 years. So there is a section 93 and 108 where what it basically says is that all these new mobility modes, the ride hailing or shared mobility modes, are governed under the Information Technology Act and not under the Motor Vehicles Act. So what that means actually is that all the Motor Transport Workers Act rules won't apply for them, all the permit rules won't apply for them. So they can get away with a lot of things which a public transport provider has to observe. Even a simple auto rickshaw operator has to follow all the MV Act rules, but now the aggregators don't have to follow all of that. And they have a maximum penalty of 1 lakh rupees or maximum fine of 5,000 rupees. Whereas, even BMTC bus actually pays much higher per bus, not as an aggregator aggregating lakhs of vehicles. So the rules on aggregators are quite relaxed, so which actually again kills competition. So kills public transport in general because there is again deregulated competition. So I know we are out of time. So the point I want to make here is that the way the MV Act approaches the whole public transport itself is flawed. So we need to actually proactively engage more on doing things towards public transport, but there is still scope to do it because at the end of the day, public transport is a state subject, and so when all this, even though state schemes and all are announced, there is no structure defined yet. So maybe people like PIF can actually look at this and work on how a state scheme can work towards public transport, and we work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was struck by the statement made by Dr. Ajay Singh. He said that this is a permanent pandemic, right? And I happen to completely agree with that. And I also think that we have vaccine for that. Whether we'll get it done or not depends on all of you, all of us. But I think if I were to continue that analogy, the two vaccines are decentralization and public participation. If we can get to that stage in a few years from now, it's already happening silently in many places, but not widely understood or seriously taken by policy makers and people like us, people that are interested in influencing public policy also. So let me, and Janagra has been working on both of these areas for quite some time with limited success, I would say, at the risk of downplaying some of our own accomplishments. There's still a lot more work needs to be done in both these areas. Like many other speakers said today, including the last speaker, Ravi, my good friend, there is, what can central government do to fix the streets in Bengaluru or Tumkuru or Kolar? Not much. What can state government do to fix the roads in Kolar? As you heard the story, the chief minister returned along with everybody else returned. But people are dying there. So those people are more interested in reducing deaths there than anybody sitting anywhere else. But how do you make that happen, right? And I also think that there's a lot of terminology issue. I had a good chat with Dr. Annapurna coming here. So this lot of this is about public perception, understanding, creating the voice of people in a way that can influence the decision makers. How do we do that, right? So how did, last year or whenever this happened, the MVA Act came, and one of the slides Mr. Madhu has talked about, Karnataka has jumped to action and forced the fines to be reduced. You know how that happened? Simply by tweeting about it. So many people went on Twitter, go on creating noise, media picked it up, put public pressure on the politicians, and eventually it got reduced. And what is their argument again? If I violate a traffic violation, that should not be reduced. Why are you complaining instead of saying that don't violate traffic rules, Fines will be high only for the violators. It's not for everybody, right? But that point is lost. Its point is completely lost. It's like saying I may or I will violate something. At that time, you better not fine me more. This is the argument, and that one. How did that happen? And how many people actually think the otherwise, right? I am one of those voices that said it should be even higher. If you skip a red light, I should be, fined 5,000 rupees. And I've had the experience of going to university and working in the United States for a good 10 years. And the very first day I walked into my university town, I didn't know anybody, I didn't know anything. That's the campus, this is my place of stay. I started walking on the street, and if I cross a road, every car is stopping. Everybody is stopping and letting me go. Because pedestrian first is inculcated from the time you apply for a license, and when somebody is trying to get a license, which I also did, we all fail numerous times before we get our license. Why is that? Because they are so strict about issuing a license and going through this process and all that. So how many people in India do you think want more fines for traffic violations? That number, my estimate, my gut feeling will be 100 times more people want more traffic fines than those that want to reduce traffic fines. And that voice is not aggregated, that voice is not heard. Because you're not thinking that, oh, let me go and say we must have higher traffic fines. You hesitate to take a stand like that publicly. So organizations like this should try to organize, to try to mobilize and amplify the voices like this from multiple citizens and common people voices. Today we have the ultimate weapon in our hand, and that's called WhatsApp, right? So how do you use WhatsApp to create public perception about why it is important to increase traffic fines? And I'm pretty sure in every little WhatsApp group that each of us in, this will lead to a trigger to a debate. That itself is a great thing to happen, because public is now talking about it, good or bad, whatever opinion it might be, and eventually it will lead to that. So how do you convert the voices that support progressive moves to influence policymakers? This has to be a very big part of whoever is trying to influence this kind of thing. Not worry about people that are against it or trying to reduce it, but try to make it happen. Another speaker, I think Mr. Ravikant Gowda or somebody else, said that we don't know how pedestrians feel. All of us have come here in four-wheelers, therefore we don't know how pedestrians feel. But we do know how pedestrians feel, because whether you are a four-wheeler or two-wheeler, at some point you end up going to be on the street. You can't sleep or take a bath in a four-wheeler, right? Or you cannot walk into a movie theater or a club or whatever it is. So there is that aspect. And then the other aspect is, if you don't know, then get to the forums where that happened. And those forums in Bengaluru today exist. I take the example of Bengaluru, and those are called ward committees. What is a ward committee? He also made another point. A ward, most of the times, and a very valid point, the problem is bad illumination. There is no light. Whose job is to fix the illumination? It's the BBMP's job. Whose job is to fix the footpaths? It's the BBMP's job. Whose job is to fix the minor roads? It's again the BBMP's job. The potholes, all of that. So, where is the forum where traffic police and BBMP come together? There isn't any. And that is now available in ward committee. We have 45 traffic police stations in Bengaluru, but we have 198 wards. And in every ward committee, the traffic police, many of the ward committees, I'm happy to tell you, also have an active presence of the traffic police. So what if the ward committee creates an action plan for road safety or pedestrian safety, where the BESCOM, BWSSB, BBMP and traffic police are all sitting there. Citizens are sitting here, together they come up with that. Due to our efforts from last year with participatory budgeting, again a very pleasant news for those of you from outside Bengaluru to know is that the BBMP has now allocated 20 lakhs to each of the ward committees, said that this money you use for your footpaths. We don't care how you spend this money, you spend it on footpaths. Actually, they've given 60 lakhs. 20 lakhs for footpaths, 20 for potholes, 20 for borewells. Small amount, but it's a phenomenal shift in thinking and giving power to the people. And basically trying to make them part of the solution, rather than people who are always complaining and worrying and crying and saying, oh, you are not doing this, you are not doing this. Now there is an exchange of ideas and the collective solutioning that is now possible. Now, Can we have a situation where, what happens is one day we'll see Bengaluru Police Commissioner now on Twitter, next 1 hour, I'm available to take your questions, or they do water adalats, or Bescom adalat will be happening on one day. All of those things are good to go into media, and next day you will see a small media report saying bus adalat happened, 200 complaints came in, whatever. But that is a totally ad hoc and unnecessary process, only to attract some media attention perhaps, and nothing more. Whereas an institutionalized setup like ward committees happens twice a month, every single month, and every single ward. If that happens again and again, then there is a actually understanding of what the issues are and what the solutions are, and there is follow up. Otherwise, you come and complain on Twitter or on a phone call, and then you go away. If it happens, good. If it doesn't happen, nobody will ask you. And it's a whims and fancies of the department to organize another adalat. And the second adalat happens, they don't say these are the things that came in the last adalat, so these are the solutions. They start over, right? So there is no tracking of moving of things. So that's why ward committees are very important in reversing the public opinion. Pedestrians, I think we should stop using the word road safety and start calling it street safety. Roads have a very mechanical, feel to it. They are all about vehicles, whereas streets are about people. Some years back, some of the citizens here in one of the groups that I was part of, we launched a campaign called Nadiyalu Bidi. Nadiyalu Bidi basically means let us walk. Please allow us to walk. And someone else mentioned you are scared to cross the street. You have to be PT Usha, or I think now we have new Olympic heroes, so I should take their names to cross the street in any of the cities. On top of it, we are now putting what is that called skywalks everywhere, which are basically ugly urban furniture that is used for some illegal activities, and hardly anybody uses them for actual crossing. And look at what message we are sending them. If you want to go by road, you drive your way off the street. But if you want to cross, now you climb up 60 feet, cross 30 feet, climb down 60 feet. This is a punishment for being a pedestrian. Now, what have you got to lose by installing a walk signal? Why do Americans come to India and walk across the Brigade Road or some other road? Because they don't find a walk signal. If I go to any city in America or any other place, I walk up to the signal and press a button that's written walk on it. I wait for my turn, just like a car waits, I wait. When I get my walk signal, I cross. Now there are less than 1,000 signals in Bengaluru, if I'm correct. Ravi will know the numbers. What does it take to create a walk signal in every single intersection? It costs next to nothing, but we don't have it. We've been asking for it for years. I'm feeling a little bad that Mr. Gowda has to go, but I made this point to him earlier, and I hope that this can be made again. There is nothing that's stopping us from creating walk signals in every intersection. And guess what the message that sends? Pedestrian first. And pedestrians have equal right to the street. Instead, we keep on building, skywalks and conveying the signal that, and when you ask pedestrians, do you want this? They say, no, but car has to go fast. I have to wait. Right? In senior citizens, everybody is resigned to the fact that it is not their place, it is somebody else's place. So we need to change the mindset and make sure that people understand that this is also their space. It's a public space, it's shared space. In fact, a car with a single person is occupying so much of a shared space, whereas I as a pedestrian is occupying so little space, and yet I have given low priority. The same logic as why public transport should get more space, like a bus lane. Because now 70 people are in the bus. If you take 70 cars, guess how much space they are taking on the road versus one bus with 70 people. So should the bus go faster than the 70 cars or not? It should, because that means these people are sacrificing their space or giving up their space for the greater digital city. Yes, I'll conclude. Finally, child-friendly cities. This is a big theme. I think Mr. Madhu has mentioned earlier. I think we should catch them young. I think all of us agree on that. So how do you catch them young? So civic education obviously has something that has a big role to play in it. At Janagraha, we've been trying to do this with our civic learning programs. We are associated with 600 schools. Not enough. Just not enough. We need to create education for parents actually. Many of the parents encourage their under 16 kids to take the two-wheeler to get that milk packet that somebody mentioned. And in some of the areas in Sanjay Nagar, some citizen groups have done studies and found that there are at least 300 kids under 15 years of age driving away two-wheelers. So they try to stop them, and as citizens, responsible citizens, and try to counsel their parents and all of that. So we need to create a environment where kids can go to school by walk or cycle. If more children are on the street walking and cycling, that automatically puts a lot of people on alert into be better safe drivers, because that could be your own kid. And anyway, who wants to cause an accident with a kid? But the parents are not confident to allow that to happen unless there is no signal between the home and the school. You cannot take a cycle, right? This is what I would tell my kids. When we didn't have that, it took me a lot of time to encourage my kids to take the cycle, which they did without any issue for many years now. Now, these kind of things can only happen when there is a coordination between all of these different things we are talking about. There is a ward committee, there is a city level plan, there is a national campaign for pedestrian, right? While we see national laws, what we actually need is national campaigns. Like the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan has created a sense of cleanliness. The pedestrian first could be a national campaign where we all recognize the need for this, and the number of people that we are losing, it's not worth losing one life for this, right? Many years ago, people did not know the effects of second-hand smoking. They would go on smoke. People will come to your house and your uncle or whoever will come and smoke, and the kids will be right there in the room. But that doesn't happen anymore because everybody understands that the kid can get cancer if somebody else is smoking. So it's not done anymore. So how did that behavioral change happen? So there's a lot to learn from that and implement that in all the things that we do. I think with that, I'll end this and let us go to lunch. Thank you very much, Dr. Annapurna and PF, for giving me the opportunity. And we look forward to working with CUTS and all the other wonderful partners here. Thank you.